Page 42 to 43. It was Timothy. He took a spot beside me, opened his robe, revealed a surprisingly sizable wand, and started emptying his bladder as well. Sorry about that, Rudius, he said after a moment. About what? I wasn't entirely sure what he even was apologizing for. Sara, she's not a bad kid, but she's gotten a little bit full of herself lately, you know? Can you hardly blame her? That girl's a prodigy with the bow. The 4B ranked members of Counter Arrow were seasoned veterans, yes, but Sara stood out for her sheer talent. I've seen her shoot down a monster after monster with perfectly placed arrows. Even at long range, her battle awareness and agility were top notch, and she never seemed to slip up. When it came to combat, she was already on the level of an A-ranked adventurer. Archers weren't particularly common in this world. Mages could strike from a greater range and do more damage with their attacks, and while a magician could regain their mana after a good night's sleep, an archer was limited by their arrows. The more you carried, the more weight you had to lug around. This wasn't some RPG where you could stash 10,000 of these things in your backpack. For the most part, you were better off learning magic than the bow. That said, truly special talent could make all those disadvantages seem irrelevant. When you could fire 5 arrows in the time it took a magician to cast one single spell or land a critical hit every time, you could get by just fine as an archer in this line of work at least. You wanted to become a single strongest person in the entire world? That was an entirely different story. Sara was incredibly skilled at her age. Her raw talent was probably comparable to that of Eris. Well, no slouch yourself, ain't you? That's fairly obvious, I mean. You're the first silent spellcaster I've seen since my teacher at the academy. It hasn't done me much good. I still lost everyone I cared about. Ah, right. My apologies. So that, of course, was page 42 to 43 of the light novels of Volume 7. The reason why I wanted to read it is because this is one section that was cut, except, of course, them kind of talking for that short period and then Rudy saying at the end, it hasn't done me any good. I still lost everyone I cared about. Ah, right. My apologies. That's pretty much where things kind of ended, and this whole monologuing section about her being a prodigy was cut from the actual episode itself. I mentioned that in the previous video, I put it in the title, but apparently some people did not actually watch the video, only read half the title and attacked me for not actually getting their own facts right. But one of the things that I did talk about in that previous video that I won't give full context to, but if you want to watch it, you can watch it, is the reason why Sara has a great disdain towards Rudy, and there are other reasons to that, so if you want that other reason, it probably may or may not be explained in the future episodes depending on what they decide to cut. Saying that they're not going to cut things is clearly not true, because episode 0 had a lot of cut content. Episode 1 has shown that there is some cut content, and depending on future episodes there will most likely be other parts cut as well, because anime to light novel is never one-to-one. But the main thing that I wanted to discuss about here is the fact that yes, she is an extremely talented archer, and in an adventurer party there are a lot of issues that you can run into as an archer. Friendly fire, you're in the back, you've got to be careful who's in the front. So a magic user is a lot more easier and flexible. One, because they have more spells that can be a little bit better at not creating friendly fire. Rudy, with his Quagmire skill, he's able to create mud and latch the monsters into the ground, create traps, which is very useful. It can slow them down, it can paralyze them, it can give the melee users more of an advantage, which is generally what you're going to have. Your tank, your healer can then assist them, and then you've got your main damage dealers with your swords, etc. So those are very useful, your rogues types. But with an archer, there's a lot of underlining issues. Limited arrows, close combat, but also, when you look at things like D&D and other game mechanics, this is why you will have those situations where some games will have things like rogues, where they will have a crossbow or a bow as a sort of secondary weapon, so that if they do have the advantage that they can use it, they will use it, but then when they're in close combat or there is that issue of friendly fire, confined spaces, they will then use other methods as well. Not all games do that though. There are some games that I play, like Fire Emblem, where they do have more pure range-based users. They try to give those more range in some cases than magic users, which goes against what Mushoku Tensei is doing, or they'll try and do other things like just more damage, while a magic user might not do as much damage. It depends on the individual games on how they approach the difference between a bow user or an archer to an actual wizard or a magic user or a caster, depending on what gaming terms they want to use. So I just think it's really fascinating how a power fantasy Isekai world does archers and magic users, while when you also look at other games, they do things very differently, and comparing them is just a fun little thing to do. And it of course is a little bit of a trivial fun fact that of course this section was in the actual light novels that you can find out about, and I thought you'd enjoy me reading it. The other thing also to discuss about is the similarities between Eris and Sara. I don't think they are the exact same. I've seen the comments of Sara is just a Walmart version of Eris. I think the comment's hilarious, but I actually do disagree with it. I don't think Sara is a cheap version or even similar in any major sense. You can look at some similarities, like small ones, like the tsundere tendency, but why they are tsunderes is completely different. Yes, they're tsunderes, but they're tsunderes for completely different reasons. Eris was just violent for the sake of being violent. Sara has a bit of a chip on her shoulder. She doesn't like the broodiness. She also doesn't like other aspects about Rudy that I explained in the previous video, so check that if you want that information. That will be probably stuff that will be covered later on, may or may not. It just depends on how the light novels do things, but I wanted to be very clear there that that may or may not happen in future episodes for future reference. But I don't see them as the same. The issue is that Rudy is projecting his insecurity and his issues that he's having in his own mind about Eris. So it's like one of those where people in a bad breakup, and when they go to a location or they've got a new partner and they're at a place, say like a place, like their new partner's taken them on a date, and they go to this location and beware of the individual taking the other person on a date, they're taking them to somewhere similar that the other partner has been to, and the first thing that partner's going to do when at that location, and possibly they're still hurting from that relationship, even if they're not hurting, they will instantly think, oh, I was at this location with my ex or ex different partner. And so that is what Rudy's doing. He's seeing little situations that are happening and thinking, oh, this reminds me of them. And so that's because of the fact that it is something that people do even if they're fully over an individual, but because Rudy is very much not over Eris, and of course Ghislaine comes part of the package a little bit to a degree because Ghislaine was there and is close, Rudy kind of projects that insecurity on that and kind of reminisces on those situations. That does not make Sara a Eris replacement at all, far from it. It's just that that's what Rudy's doing. He's seeing Eris in her because of his issues going on. So I'd love to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. What do you think of the relationship between Rudy and Sara, and of course the impact on Eris as well on Rudy overall? Love to know it in the comment section down below. Of course I will be covering other stuff, spoiler, non-spoiler based content, but I'm generally just here to have a fun discussion and bring up different topics and questions that people have. Of course, if you want heavy spoiler content, go check my light novel analysis breakdown videos where I go through volume by volume of the events and have a breakdown on those as well. So they will be in the playlist down below. So of course, if you like this video, hit the like, subscribe, and I'll see you beautiful nerds in the next video.